The stagecoach rattled to a stop in a cloud of Colorado dust, and Alara Whitfield pressed her gloved hand against the window, searching the crowd for a kind face. She'd memorized his letters, every word. A respectable establishment, a partnership built on mutual respect, a new beginning for us both. 3 months of correspondence had painted Samuel Whitmore as a gentleman, a widower seeking companionship, offering security in exchange for partnership. The words had felt like salvation when she'd read them in her cramped Boston boarding house, her fingers numb from 14-hour shifts at the textile mill. The door opened. Dust swirled in. "Miss Whitfield?" The voice was rough, slurred. Alara's smile froze. The man standing there wasn't the Samuel Whitmore from the photograph. This man was younger, broader, swaying slightly. His shirt was stained, his eyes bloodshot. When he grinned, she saw a missing tooth on the left side. I'm looking for Mr. Samuel Whitmore," she managed. "Sam's dead." The man said it like he was commenting on the weather. "Died 6 weeks back." Hart gave out. "I'm Gideon Cross. I own the Lucky Strike now." He reached for her bag. "You're mine instead." The words hung in the air like a threat. "I don't understand." Alara pulled her carpet bag closer. "The letters. Sam wrote 'em. I'm collecting." Gideon's grin widened. "Paid good money bringing you out here. Stage fare, processing fees, all of it. You owe me, sweetheart. One way or another, you're gonna pay." The other passengers squeezed past, avoiding her eyes. The driver was already unhitching the horses. In 30 seconds, she'd be alone with this stranger in a town she didn't know, 2,000 miles from anything familiar. "There's been a mistake," Alara said, forcing steel into her voice. "I'll take the next stage back to—" "Ain't no stage back till next month." Gideon grabbed her arm. His fingers dug in hard enough to bruise. "And you ain't got the fare anyway, do you? Spent everything getting here." He was right. She had $7.30 to her name. The street was wider than any in Boston, but emptier. False-fronted buildings leaned against each other like drunks. A few people watched from doorways, a woman in a faded dress, 2 men outside what looked like a general store, a boy with a skinny dog. None of them moved to help. "Let go of me," Alara said quietly. "Or what?" Gideon yanked her forward. She stumbled on the coach step, nearly fell. "You're going to learn real quick how things work out here. Ain't like your fancy Boston. Out here, you belong to whoever's strong enough to keep you." He dragged her across the street toward a 2-story building with a painted sign, Lucky Strike Saloon. Through the window, she could see men at tables, smoke hanging in the air, a woman in a red dress leaning against the bar. The door banged open. Every head turned. "Gentlemen," Gideon announced, his grip still tight on Alara's arm. "Meet the new girl, fresh from Boston. Still got that city smell on her." Laughter rippled through the room. Alara's face burned. "She ain't for you lot," Gideon continued. "She's mine, bought and paid for. But she'll be working the floor so you can look. Just don't touch, unless you're paying me first." "I am not—" Alara started, but Gideon's hand moved to her throat, just resting there. Not squeezing, not yet. A promise. "You are what I say you are," he said softly, his whiskey breath hot against her ear. "Now smile pretty, and thank me for giving you a roof." The woman in the red dress, she looked about 40, hard-worn, caught Alara's eye and shook her head slightly. A warning. Gideon shoved Alara toward the stairs. "Ruby'll show you where you sleep. You start work tonight. And Alara?" He grabbed her chin, forced her to look at him. "You try to run, I'll find you. And when I do, I'll make sure you regret every step." Mont. The room was barely bigger than a closet. A narrow bed, a washstand with a cracked pitcher, one window that looked out over the alley where men pissed after drinking. The wallpaper was peeling, stained brown in the corners from God knew what. Ruby stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Up close, she looked older, tired. "You really answer a mail-order ad?" Ruby asked. "I thought the letters said—" Alara's voice cracked. She swallowed hard, refused to cry. "It was supposed to be different. Always is." Ruby's expression softened slightly. "Sam was decent enough for what that's worth. Gideon's his nephew, inherited everything when Sam died." She paused. including his debts, which now includes you, the way Gideon sees it. I'm not property. Tell that to him. Ruby glanced toward the stairs. Look, honey, I'll give it to you straight. You got 3 choices. 1, you work the floor, serve drinks, smile pretty, let the men think they got a chance. Gideon takes most of what you make, but you'll have enough for food. 2, you work upstairs, you know what I mean. More money, but Gideon still takes his cut. 3, you try to run. And if I run? Ruby's face went hard. Last girl who tried, Gideon caught her 2 miles outside town, brought her back tied to his horse. She worked upstairs after that, whether she wanted to or not. Disappeared about 3 months later. Gideon said she ran off with a miner. She met Alara's eyes. Nobody believed him. The floor seemed to tilt. So don't run, Ruby finished. Not unless you got a real plan. And you don't. None of us ever do. She left, closing the door with a soft click. Alara sat on the bed. The mattress was thin, lumpy. She could hear voices from downstairs, the clink of glasses, someone playing a badly tuned piano. Her carpet bag sat at her feet, everything she owned in the world. 2 dresses, some undergarments, her mother's silver brush, the letters from Samuel Whitmore that had turned out to be lies. She pulled out the letters, read them again in the fading light. The handwriting was neat, educated. I believe in treating a woman with respect and dignity. Together we can build something lasting. I promise you safety and a home. All lies. Or maybe Sam had meant them before he died and left her to Gideon. It didn't matter now. Alara stood, walked to the window. The sun was setting, painting the mountains in the distance orange and purple, beautiful and completely indifferent to her situation. She pressed her forehead against the glass. She'd left Boston because staying meant slow death, 16-hour days in the mill, breathing cotton dust, watching girls her age develop the cough that meant their lungs were failing. She'd watched her own mother die that way, drowning on dry land. The mail-order ad had seemed like a miracle, a chance at something better. Instead, she'd traded one kind of prison for another. Downstairs, someone shouted. Glass broke. Laughter followed. Alara closed her eyes. That night, Gideon made her work the floor. He gave her a dress, green satin, too tight across the chest, too short at the hem. Ruby helped her into it without comment, then handed her a tray. Don't argue with the customers, Ruby said. Don't refuse a drink if they buy you one. Water it down when you can. Don't go upstairs with anyone unless Gideon says. And don't look Gideon in the eye when he's been drinking. Makes him mean. The saloon was packed. Men crowded around tables, playing cards, drinking, shouting over each other. The air was thick with smoke and sweat. Piano music fought with conversations. In the back corner, 2 men were arm wrestling, while others bet on the outcome. Alara carried her tray through the crowd, delivering whiskey and beer, forcing herself to smile when men made comments about her accent, her hair, her body. One grabbed her waist as she passed. She twisted away and kept moving. Another called her sugar and asked if she was sweet all over. She pretended not to hear. Gideon watched from behind the bar, his eyes tracking her every movement. Around midnight, a miner, young, drunk, belligerent, grabbed her wrist when she tried to take his empty glass. Sit with me, he slurred. Have a drink. I'm working, Alara said evenly. I need to. I said sit. He yanked her down onto his lap. His friends laughed. Pretty thing, like you shouldn't be working so hard. Alara went rigid. The man's arm was around her waist, holding her in place. She could smell the liquor on him, feel his breath on her neck. Let me go, she said quietly. Make me. The table erupted in laughter again. Alara looked toward the bar. Gideon was watching, a slight smile on his face. He wasn't going to help. This was part of the job as far as he was concerned, part of her payment for the crime of existing in his saloon. She drove her elbow back hard into the miner's ribs. He yelped, loosened his grip. She stood, smoothing her dress with shaking hands. Touch me again and I'll break your nose, she said, her voice steady despite the fear racing through her. For a moment the table went quiet. The miner stared at her, stunned. Then his face darkened. You little... He stood, fist raised. A hand caught his wrist. That's enough. The voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise. The miner turned, and Alara saw the man who'd intervened, tall, weathered, maybe 35, with dark hair and eyes that had seen too much. He wore range clothes, dusty from travel, and there was a stillness about him that made the drunk miner hesitate. "This ain't your business," the miner said, but his voice had lost its edge. "It is now." The stranger's grip tightened. "Sit down. Finish your drink. Leave the lady alone." "She ain't no lady." "Sit down." The miner sat. The stranger released his wrist, then looked at Alara. "You all right?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Good." He glanced toward Gideon, who was now watching with narrowed eyes, then back to Alara. "Keep your distance from that table for the rest of the night." He turned and walked to the bar, ordered a whiskey, and settled in like nothing had happened. Alara stood frozen, her heart still racing. Ruby appeared at her elbow. "That's Rowan Cade," Ruby whispered. "Drifter. Shows up every few months, stays a week or two, then disappears again. Don't cause trouble, don't look for it, but don't back down from it either." She paused. "Gideon hates him." "Why?" "Because Gideon can't intimidate him, and men like Gideon need everyone to be afraid." Alara looked at Rowan Cade's back, the set of his shoulders, the way he held his glass. Not tense, not relaxed, just present. Gideon appeared beside her, his hand closing on her upper arm. "Back to work," he said. "And stay away from Cade. Man like that's got no use for girls like you." He shoved her toward another table. Alara worked until 3 in the morning, when Gideon finally closed the saloon. Her feet ached, her face hurt from smiling, and she smelled like smoke and spilled beer. Ruby and the other girl, May, younger than Alara, with dead eyes, helped clean up while Gideon counted the night's take. "Ruby, upstairs," Gideon said without looking up. "May, you too. Got customers waiting." Both women went without argument. Alara started toward the stairs to her room. "Where are you going?" Gideon's voice stopped her. "To bed. You said—" "You're in my room tonight." He smiled. "Time you started earning your keep proper." The world narrowed to that smile, those words. "No," Alara said. Gideon's smile didn't waver. "That wasn't a question. I said no." He crossed the room fast, grabbed her throat, slammed her against the wall. Not hard enough to knock her out, but hard enough to make stars dance in her vision. "You think you got choices here?" His face was inches from hers. "You think you're special? You're nothing. You're nobody. You're what I say you are, and tonight you're mine." Alara couldn't breathe. His hand was crushing her windpipe. She clawed at his wrist, panic rising. "Problem here?" Rowan Cade's voice again, quiet and cold. Gideon's grip loosened slightly. He didn't let go, but he turned his head. Rowan stood at the bottom of the stairs, his expression unreadable. "Private business," Gideon said. "Doesn't look private." Rowan stepped closer. "Looks like you're choking someone who can't fight back." "She works for me. I do what I want with my property." "She's not property." Rowan's voice dropped lower. "Let her go." "Or what?" The air in the room changed. Alara could feel it, the way violence became possible, then probable, then inevitable. Rowan didn't answer with words. He just looked at Gideon, and something in that look made Gideon's hand fall away from Alara's throat. She gasped, stumbled sideways, coughing. "This is my place," Gideon said, but he'd backed up a step. "You don't tell me what to do in my place." "I'm telling you this once." Rowan's hand rested casually near his belt, where Alara now noticed a revolver. "Leave her alone tonight. You got a problem with that, we can settle it outside." Gideon's face went red, then white. His hand twitched toward his own gun. "Do it," Rowan said softly. "See what happens." For 5 seconds, maybe 10, nobody moved. Then Gideon laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "She ain't worth dying over. Keep her tonight. But tomorrow, she's back to work. And what I do with my property ain't your concern." He grabbed a bottle from behind the bar and stalked upstairs, slamming the door to his room hard enough to shake the walls. Alara leaned against the wall, shaking. Her throat throbbed where Gideon's fingers had pressed. Rowan picked up the chair Gideon had knocked over, set it upright. "You got somewhere to go?" "A room, upstairs." "Go there. Lock the door. Put something heavy against it." Tomorrow he'll..." "Tomorrow's tomorrow." Rowan looked at her directly for the first time. His eyes were gray, like river stones. Tonight, you're safe. That's all you can ask for out here, one night at a time. Why did you help me? He shrugged. Seemed like you needed it. I don't even know you. No, you don't. He turned toward the door. Lock your door, Ilara. He was gone before she could ask how he knew her name. Ilara didn't sleep. She lay on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the saloon settling. Footsteps overhead, Ruby and May with their customers. Gideon's door slamming again, the building creaking in the wind. Her throat ached. When she touched it, she could feel the bruises already forming. One night at a time, Rowan had said. But what about the next night? And the one after that? How many nights could she survive here before something in her broke for good? She thought about the girl Ruby had mentioned, the one who tried to run. Disappeared 3 months later. Nobody believed Gideon's story. She thought about her mother, drowning on dry land in Boston, lungs full of cotton dust. She thought about the letters, the promises, the hope that had carried her 2,000 miles into this trap. Dawn light started creeping through the window, gray and cold. Somewhere outside, a rooster crowed. Ilara sat up, walked to the washstand, poured water from the cracked pitcher. She washed her face, her neck, her hands. The water was freezing, but it cleared her head. She couldn't run, not yet. She had no money, no horse, no idea where to go. Ruby was right about that. But she couldn't stay either. Not like this. Not as Gideon's property, which meant she needed a third option. Something Ruby hadn't mentioned because Ruby had learned to stop looking for alternatives. Ilara dried her face on the threadbare towel, then opened her carpet bag. At the bottom, wrapped in her mother's spare apron, was the one thing she'd kept hidden. A small knife, sharp and well-balanced. Her father's before he died. Her mother had given it to her the day she left Boston. Just in case, her mother had said, already sick, already knowing she wouldn't live to see Ilara's new life. Ilara held the knife, feeling its weight. It wasn't much, but it was something. She tucked it into her boot, under her skirt, where it wouldn't show. Then she lay back down and waited for whatever came next. The next day started with Gideon pounding on her door at noon. "Get up," he shouted. "Saloon opens in an hour. You're working." Ilara dressed slowly, deliberately. The green dress again. She had no choice about that. But she braided her hair tight, pulled it back severe, put on the face she'd learned in the mill, the one that showed nothing. Downstairs, Ruby was sweeping. May was nowhere in sight. "Sleep okay?" Ruby asked without looking up. "No." "Nobody does. First week's the worst." Ruby dumped the dustpan into a bucket. "Gideon's in a mood today. Stay out of his way." But staying out of Gideon's way proved impossible. He found reasons to touch her, adjusting her dress, moving her hair, running his hand down her back when she passed. Each touch was a reminder, a threat, a promise of what he thought was coming. The afternoon crowd was smaller than the night before, mostly regulars, men who worked local jobs and stopped in for a drink before heading home. Ilara served them mechanically, her face pleasant, her thoughts elsewhere. Around 4, Rowan Cade came in. He took a table in the corner, ordered coffee instead of whiskey, and pulled out a worn book. He didn't look at her, didn't acknowledge the previous night, just sat and read like he was in a library instead of a saloon. Gideon noticed. "Cade." Rowan looked up. "You need to move along. Don't want your kind here." "My kind?" "Troublemakers. Men who don't know their place." Rowan marked his page, closed the book. "I paid for my coffee. I'm drinking it. If that's a problem, refund my money and I'll go." Gideon's face darkened, but he didn't move. Around them, the saloon had gone quiet, men watching to see what would happen. "Fine," Gideon finally said. "Drink your damn coffee. But you're not welcome here. This is my last time saying it nice." Noted. Rowan opened his book again. Gideon stalked behind the bar, poured himself a whiskey, downed it in one swallow. Ilara felt the tension like a wire pulled tight, ready to snap. She brought Rowan a refill he didn't ask for, just as an excuse to get close enough to whisper, "You should go. He's going to hurt you." Rowan looked up at her. "He's going to try. That's different." "Why are you doing this?" "Drinking coffee?" He took a sip. "Because I like coffee." "You know what I mean. He set down the cup. I'm doing it because men like Gideon only understand one thing. You bow to them once, you'll be bowing forever. I don't bow. That's going to get you killed. Maybe. He met her eyes. Or maybe it'll show someone else they don't have to bow either. Before Alara could respond, Gideon was there, grabbing her arm. Back to work, he snarled. Then to Rowan. And you, out, now. I don't care about your coffee. Get out of my saloon. Rowan stood slowly, leaving money on the table. I'm going, but you put your hands on her like that again, we're going to have a different conversation. Is that a threat? It's a fact. Rowan walked out, leaving a silence behind him that felt like the breath before an explosion. Gideon turned on Alara. Upstairs, now. The saloon's still open. I said upstairs. He shoved her toward the stairs. Around them, customers looked away. Ruby kept cleaning glasses like nothing was happening. Alara stumbled up the stairs, Gideon right behind her. Her hand went to her boot, to the knife hidden there, but she didn't draw it. Not yet. He pushed her into her room, slammed the door. You think you're smart? Gideon's voice was low, dangerous. Getting Cade to fight your battles? Think that makes you safe? I didn't ask him to... Shut up. He backhanded her across the face. The blow sent her spinning into the washstand. The pitcher fell, shattered on the floor. Cade's leaving town tomorrow. And when he does, there's no one to hide behind. Just you and me. And I'm going to teach you exactly what happens to girls who think they're too good for their station. He grabbed her by the hair, yanked her close. His other hand went to his belt. Alara's hand closed on the knife handle. Let me go, she said. Or what? You'll scream? Go ahead. No one's coming. No one cares what happens to you. He pushed her toward the bed. Time you learned that. Alara pulled the knife. Gideon stopped, stared at the blade, then laughed. You're going to stick me with that little thing? Yes, Alara said. Her hand wasn't shaking. If you touch me again, I will put this in your throat and I will not feel bad about it. Something in her voice made him pause. Maybe it was the steadiness. Maybe it was the fact that she'd moved into a stance that suggested she knew how to use the knife. Her father had taught her to gut fish when she was 10. A man's throat couldn't be that different. Gideon's eyes narrowed. You ain't got the spine. Try me. They stood there, 3 feet apart, Gideon's belt half undone and Alara's knife between them. Downstairs, someone started playing the piano. This ain't over, Gideon finally said. You can't watch yourself every second, and that knife won't save you when I catch you sleeping. He left, slamming the door so hard the frame cracked. Alara stood there until her legs gave out, then sank to the floor among the broken pieces of the pitcher. Her hands were shaking now, the knife trembling in her grip. She'd done it. She'd stood up to him. But Gideon was right about one thing. She couldn't watch herself every second, and next time he'd be ready for the knife, which meant she was out of time. She needed to run. Tonight. Before Gideon came back. But run where? With what money? Into wilderness she didn't know, in a territory where women alone didn't last long. Alara closed her eyes, trying to think through the panic. A soft knock on the door made her jump. It's Ruby. Alara opened the door a crack, knife still in hand. Ruby took in the broken pitcher, the bruise forming on Alara's cheek, the knife. He's downstairs drinking himself mean. You got maybe 2 hours before he comes back up. She held out a small cloth bag. There's $40 in here, enough to get you on the next stage if you leave now. I can't take your money. It ain't a gift. It's a loan. You pay me back someday when you're somewhere safe. Ruby pressed the bag into Alara's free hand. Stage leaves at dawn, 2 towns west. You can make it if you walk through the night. He'll come after me. Probably. Ruby's face was hard. But staying's worse. Trust me on that. Alara looked at the money, then at Ruby's face. Why are you helping me? Because I didn't help the last girl, and I think about her every damn day. Ruby stepped back. You got 2 hours. Use them. She was gone before Alara could say thank you. Alara stared at the money in her hand, then at the knife. $40. A 2-hour head start. and a long walk through darkness into uncertain safety. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was more than she'd had 5 minutes ago. She started packing. Alara moved fast, cramming her few possessions into the carpet bag. The mother's silver brush, 2 dresses, undergarments, the worthless letters from Samuel Whitmore. She hesitated over those, then left them on the bed. Let Gideon find them. Let him know she'd figured out the con. The knife went back in her boot. Ruby's $40 went into a pocket she'd sewn inside her corset back in Boston. She'd learned early that money kept on your person was money that stayed yours. Downstairs, the piano was still playing. Men's voices rose and fell. Gideon's laugh cut through it all, sharp and mean. He was drinking hard, which meant Ruby's 2-hour estimate might be optimistic. Alara cracked open her door, listened. Footsteps on the second floor. May with a customer, probably. Ruby's voice from downstairs serving drinks. No one in the hallway. She slipped out, carpet bag in hand, and made it 3 steps before a door opened behind her. "Where are you going?" May stood there, her dress half-buttoned, her customer visible in the room behind her pulling on his boots. The girl's eyes were dull, incurious, but her voice would carry if she raised it. "Nowhere," Alara whispered. "Just getting some air." May looked at the carpet bag, then at Alara's face. Something flickered in her expression. Not quite hope, not quite envy, just recognition. "Backstairs," May said quietly. "Through the kitchen. Door don't lock right, so you can slip out without the bell ringing." "Thank you," May shrugged. "Don't thank me. Just go." She shut her door. Alara found the back stairs, descended in darkness, feeling her way along the wall. The kitchen smelled like old grease and something rotten. She fumbled for the door, found it, eased it open. The alley behind the saloon was narrow, filled with refuse and shadows. She could hear the main street on the other side of the building, horses, voices, the general noise of evening. Out here, everything was quiet except for rats scurrying through garbage. Alara stepped out, closed the door behind her, and started walking. She made it maybe 20 yards before a hand caught her shoulder. She spun, reaching for the knife, but stopped when she saw who it was. Rowan Cade stood in the alley mouth, his horse's reins in one hand. "You're running," he said. Not a question. Alara's heart hammered. "Are you going to stop me?" "No." He studied her face, the bruise on her cheek, the marks on her throat. "But you won't make it on foot. Not if Gideon comes after you, and he will." "I don't have a horse." "I know." Rowan looked back toward the street, then at her. "How much money you got?" "That's none of your shh." "How much?" $40. He nodded slowly. "Enough for stage fare if you make it to the next town. Not enough if you don't." He paused. "I'm headed north. There's a settlement about 30 miles from here. Stage stops there twice a week. You can ride with me, get there by morning, catch the stage east." Alara stared at him. "Why would you help me?" "Because walking alone at night in this territory is a good way to die, and I'd rather not have that on my conscience." He said it matter-of-factly, like he was discussing the weather. "Your choice. Come with me or take your chances on foot." "I don't know you." "No, you don't." He met her eyes. "But you know Gideon. So the question is which stranger you trust more, the one who choked you or the one who stopped him." It wasn't much of a choice, but it was the only one she had. "If you try anything," Alara started. "I won't." Rowan turned to his horse, started adjusting the saddle. "But if it makes you feel better to keep that knife handy, go ahead." He'd seen the knife. Of course he had. Alara gripped her carpet bag tighter. "What do you want in return?" "Nothing." "Nobody helps for nothing." Rowan looked at her over the horse's back. "You're right. Nobody does." He cinched the saddle strap. "So here's what I want. You ride behind me, you keep quiet, and when we get to the settlement, you take that stage and disappear. You don't look back. You don't write letters. You don't tell anyone where you're going. You get out and you stay out. That's what I want. That's all. That's all." He swung up into the saddle, then held out his hand. "Coming or not?" Behind them, somewhere in the saloon, glass shattered. Men shouted. Gideon's voice rose above the rest, slurred and angry. Alara took Rowan's hand. He pulled her up behind him, her carpet bag wedged between them. She had to put her arms around his waist to keep from falling. He smelled like leather and wood smoke and the clean smell of someone who spent more time outdoors than in. "Hold tight," he said, and kicked the horse into motion. They left the alley at a trot, then a canter once they hit the open road. The town fell away behind them, the saloon, the few houses, the general store. Within minutes there was nothing but darkness and the sound of hoofbeats. Alara looked back once. She could see the Lucky Strike's windows, yellow light spilling out into the street. A figure stood in the doorway, too far to make out features, but she knew it was Gideon, knew he was looking for her. Then the road curved, and even that was gone. They rode in silence for what felt like hours. The moon was up, nearly full, turning the landscape silver and black. Mountains rose on either side, dark shapes against a darker sky. The road was barely a road, more like a trail, rutted and rocky. Alara's arms ached from holding on. Her legs cramped from the awkward position, but she didn't complain. Complaining meant talking, and talking meant acknowledging that she'd just put her life in the hands of a man she'd known for less than a day. Finally, Rowan slowed the horse to a walk. "There's a creek about a mile ahead," he said. "We'll stop there. Let the horse rest." Alara nodded against his back, too tired to speak. The creek was shallow, running over smooth stones. Rowan dismounted first, then helped her down. Her legs nearly buckled when they hit the ground. "Sit," Rowan said, pointing to a fallen log. "Drink some water. We've got another 20 miles to go." Alara sank onto the log while Rowan led the horse to the creek. She watched him in the moonlight, efficient movements, no wasted motion. He checked the horse's hooves, loosened the saddle slightly, let the animal drink its fill. "You do this a lot?" she asked. "What?" "Rescue women in the middle of the night." He glanced at her. "First time, actually." "Then why?" "Because leaving you there felt wrong." He finished with the horse, then came and sat on the other end of the log, leaving space between them. "And I don't like Gideon." "Nobody likes Gideon." "No, but most people are too scared to do anything about it." Rowan pulled a canteen from his saddlebag, took a drink, then offered it to her. "You're not from around here." "Boston." "That's a long way to come for a bad situation." Alara drank from the canteen. The water was cold, tasted faintly metallic. "I thought it was a good situation. The letters said—" She stopped. "Doesn't matter what they said. They lied." "Sam write them? You knew him?" "A little. He wasn't a bad man. Lonely, maybe. Drank too much. But he wasn't cruel." Rowan took the canteen back. "Gideon's different. Sam tried to keep him in line when he was alive, but it didn't work. And now he owns everything." Alara rubbed her arms. "The night was getting cold, including me, the way he sees it." "He's wrong." "Legally, he might not be. I signed a contract. I came out here expecting to marry Sam. That contract might transfer—" "Contracts don't make people property," Rowan said flatly. "Not even out here." "Tell that to the sheriff." "There is no sheriff. Nearest law is 40 miles south." He stood, walked back to the horse. "Which is why men like Gideon get away with what they do. Nobody to stop them. Except you." "I'm not stopping him. I'm just slowing him down." Rowan tightened the saddle again. "He'll come after you. You know that, right? He can't let you go without looking weak, and looking weak will cost him. So he'll come." Alara's stomach tightened. How much of a head start do we have? "Depends on how long it takes him to realize you're gone and how drunk he is when he does." Rowan swung back into the saddle. "If we're lucky, he won't figure it out till morning. If we're not, he's already on the road." He held out his hand again. Alara took it, let him pull her up. This time she noticed calluses on his palms, old scars on his knuckles. Working hands, fighting hands. They rode faster now, the horse moving at a steady lope that ate up the miles. The landscape changed, fewer trees, more open ground. The mountains drew closer on one side, falling away on the other, into darkness that suggested a valley. Alara's mind raced. She'd escaped Gideon, but to what? Another town where she knew no one, with $40 that would maybe last a month if she was careful. Then what? Another job in another mill? Another set of bosses who thought women were furniture? "What's in the north?" she asked suddenly. Rowan didn't answer right away. "Why?" The stage goes east, back toward civilization, but you said you're headed north. I am. To what? A ranch, about 100 miles from here. Yours? Was my father's, now it's mine. He paused. Or what's left of it. What happened? Life happened. He died. I left for a while. Things fell apart. Another pause. I'm trying to put them back together. Elara felt the rhythm of the horse beneath her, the steady rise and fall of Rowan's breathing. Is that why you keep moving? Between the ranch and wherever else you go? Part of it? He shifted in the saddle. Ranch doesn't run itself, but it doesn't need me there every day either, so I drift. Pick up work here and there, come back when I'm needed. Sounds lonely. It is. He said it simply, without self-pity. But it's honest. I answer to myself, work when I want, leave when I'm ready. No one owns me. The words hung in the air between them. No one owns me. Elara thought about the mill in Boston, where foremen treated girls like machines. Thought about Gideon, who'd called her property to her face. Thought about every man who'd ever assumed she existed for his convenience. Must be nice, she said quietly. It has its costs. Rowan glanced back at her. Freedom means you're on your own when things go wrong. No one to help, no one to blame, just you and whatever you can manage. I'll take that over what I left behind. You say that now. Wait till you're hungry and cold, and the nearest town is 2 days away. I've been hungry before, cold too. Old. Elara tightened her grip as the horse jumped over a fallen branch. I'll figure it out. Rowan was quiet for a moment. Then, I believe you might. They crested a rise, and Elara saw lights in the distance, scattered, small, but definitely a settlement. That's it, Rowan said. Another hour. But they didn't get another hour. Behind them, faint but unmistakable, came the sound of hoofbeats. Rowan heard it too. His whole body tensed. How many horses? Elara whispered. 2. Maybe 3. He urged his horse faster. Hold on. The settlement was still too far away. The hoofbeats behind them were getting louder. It's him, Elara said. It has to be. Probably. Rowan scanned the landscape. Can you shoot? No. Figured. He pulled his horse to a stop, swung down. Get off. What are you? Get off the horse, now! Elara slid down, nearly fell. Rowan grabbed her arm, steadied her, then pulled her off the road into a stand of rocks. Stay here, he said. Don't move, don't make noise. If shooting starts, you run toward the settlement. Don't look back. Don't wait for me. Just run. What are you going to do? Talk to them. He checked his revolver, then holstered it again. If talk doesn't work, other things. You can't fight 3 men. I can if I have to. He met her eyes. But I'd rather not. So stay quiet and let me handle this. He walked back to the road, leading his horse, and stood waiting. The hoofbeats got louder. 3 riders came over the rise, Gideon in front, 2 men Elara recognized from the saloon behind him. They slowed when they saw Rowan. Cade, Gideon's voice was hard. Where is she? Who? Don't play stupid. The girl, Elara. She ran and you helped her. Rowan shrugged. Haven't seen her. Gideon rode closer. In the moonlight, Elara could see his face, flushed from drinking, tight with anger. Your horse is lathered. You've been riding hard. Where's she going? Don't know what you're talking about. I'll ask one more time. Gideon's hand moved to his gun. Where is she? And I'll tell you one more time. I don't know. Rowan's voice stayed level, almost bored. Now, if you're done wasting my time, I've got places to be. You're lying. Gideon drew his gun. The 2 men behind him did the same. Get off the horse. We're searching your gear. Rowan didn't move. Put the gun away, Gideon. Make me. For 3 seconds, nobody breathed. Then Rowan smiled, cold and humorless. All right. His hand moved fast, too fast for Elara to track. The revolver cleared leather and fired in one smooth motion. Gideon's gun spun out of his hand and he screamed, clutching his wrist. The other 2 men froze. Anyone else? Rowan asked, his gun now pointed at the nearest rider. Both men raised their hands, carefully not going for their weapons. Rowan walked forward, picked up Gideon's gun and threw it into the darkness. Here's how this works. You 3 turn around and ride back to town. You tell people you lost my trail. You tell people the girl's long gone, probably dead in the wilderness, and you leave it alone. She's mine, Gideon started, still holding his bleeding wrist. She was never yours. Rowan cocked his revolver. And if I see you on this road again, I won't aim for your hand. We clear? Gideon's face twisted with rage and pain. You just made an enemy, Cade. Had plenty before. I'll survive one more. Rowan gestured with the gun. Now ride. For a moment, Alara thought Gideon would refuse, thought he'd rather die than back down. But then one of the other men grabbed his reins, turned his horse, and the three of them retreated back down the road. Rowan stood there until they disappeared over the rise. Then he holstered his gun and walked back to where Alara was hiding. You can come out now. She emerged from the rocks, shaking. You shot him. Barely, just knocked the gun out of his hand. Rowan checked his horse, made sure the animal hadn't been spooked by the gunfire. He'll be fine. Probably. He'll come back. You know he will. Maybe. But not tonight. Rowan mounted up, offered his hand again. Come on. We need to put more distance between us and them. Alara hesitated. You could have killed him. Why didn't you? Because killing a man, even a man like Gideon, changes things, brings law, brings questions, brings complications I don't need. He kept his hand extended. Now come on. We're burning moonlight. She took his hand, let him pull her up. They rode hard for the next hour, the horse blowing hard by the time the settlement came into full view. It was bigger than Alara expected. Maybe 30 buildings, a main street, even a church steeple visible against the stars. Rowan slowed to a walk as they entered the town. Most of it was dark, sleeping, but a few windows showed lamplight. He headed for a building with a sign. Morrison's boarding house. Owner's name is Clara Morrison, Rowan said as he dismounted. Decent woman. Tell her I sent you, pay her for 2 nights, and she'll keep you safe till the stage comes through. He helped Alara down, handed her the carpet bag. What about you? She asked. I'm heading to the livery. Horse needs rest, and I need to make sure Gideon doesn't double back. He tipped his hat. Good luck, Alara. He started to lead the horse away. Wait. Rowan stopped, looked back. Alara stood there in the dark street, carpet bag in hand, everything she owned in the world. She thought about the stage going east, back to cities she knew, back to mills and boarding houses, and slow death by inches. She thought about Rowan's words. No one owns me. Your ranch, she said. The one up north. Does it need workers? Rowan's expression didn't change. Why? Because I'm good with numbers. I can read and write. I worked in a mill for 6 years, so I know about management and production. The words came faster now. I don't know ranching, but I can learn. I work hard, I don't complain, and I can earn my keep. It's rough country up there. Rougher than what I just left? Different rough, isolated, cold in winter. Nearest town is a day's ride. He studied her face. And it's just me. No other women, no company, nothing but work and sky. I don't need company. I need work. I need a place where no one can find me and no one owns me. Alara met his eyes. You said the ranch is falling apart. I can help fix that. Not the buildings or the fences. I'm not strong enough for that. But the books, the planning, the organizing, I can do that. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. This isn't charity. If you come, you work. You earn your keep or you leave. I understand. And it's not permanent. You stay till you've got enough money to move on, then you move on. No ties, no obligations past the work. Fine. He looked at her like he was trying to figure out if she was serious or desperate or crazy. Maybe all three. You know I'm a stranger, he said finally. You know you'd be alone with me in the middle of nowhere. You know that's dangerous. I know. Alara shifted the carpet bag to her other hand. But you had chances to hurt me tonight and you didn't. You shot Gideon to protect me and you're trying to warn me off instead of taking advantage. So either you're the most patient predator I've ever met, or you're someone I can trust. And right now, I'm betting on the second one. Rowan shook his head slowly. You're either brave or foolish. Probably both. She waited. So is that a yes or a no? He looked at the boarding house, then back at her. The work's hard. The pay's minimal till the ranch turns a profit, which might never happen. And if you change your mind, you're stuck there till I can bring you back to town. I won't change my mind. You say that now. I won't. Elara's voice was firm. I came 2,000 miles to start over. This is me starting over. So yes or no? Rowan studied her for another moment. Then he sighed. Get your things. We'll leave at first light. I have my things. Then find somewhere to sleep for a few hours. There's a stable behind the livery. It's warm and the owner won't mind if you bed down in the loft. I'll wake you when it's time. He started to turn away again. Rowan. He stopped. Thank you. He didn't turn around. Don't thank me yet. You haven't seen the ranch. But there was something in his voice. Not quite warmth, but not quite coldness either. Something that made Elara think maybe, just maybe, she'd made the right choice. She found the stable, climbed into the loft, and lay down in the hay. Through gaps in the roof, she could see stars. Thousands of them, more than she'd ever seen in Boston, where smoke and fog blocked out the sky. She thought about Gideon, nursing his wounded hand back in that terrible town. Thought about Ruby and May, still trapped in the Lucky Strike. Thought about all the choices that had led her here. Some good, some terrible, all irreversible. Then she closed her eyes and for the first time in weeks, slept without nightmares. When Rowan shook her awake, the sky was just starting to lighten in the east. He handed her a cup of coffee and a piece of bread. Eat fast, he said. Long ride ahead. Elara ate, drank, and followed him out to where his horse was already saddled. The town was still asleep, quiet except for a rooster somewhere announcing the dawn. She climbed up behind him, settled the carpet bag, wrapped her arms around his waist. Last chance to change your mind, Rowan said. I'm not changing my mind. Stubborn. You have no idea. He kicked the horse into motion, and they left the settlement behind, heading north into country Elara had never seen, toward a future she couldn't imagine. Behind them, the sun rose over the mountains, turning the sky pink and gold. And Elara Whitfield, who'd come west looking for safety and found only danger, discovered something unexpected. Hope. Not the desperate, fragile hope of Samuel Whitmore's letters, but something harder, something she was building herself, one choice at a time. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but it was hers. And that was enough. The ranch appeared just after noon, and it was worse than Elara had imagined. The main house sagged to one side like a drunk leaning against a bar. Half the roof was missing shingles, and one window was boarded up with planks that didn't quite fit. The barn looked ready to collapse. Its doors hung crooked on broken hinges, and daylight showed through gaps in the walls. Fencing that should have enclosed pastures lay in tangled heaps, and what remained standing wouldn't hold back a determined chicken, much less cattle. Rowan reined the horse to a stop and sat there, not speaking. Elara stared at the wreckage. How long since you were here last? 4 months? And before that? 6 months. His voice was flat. I keep meaning to stay longer, fix things proper. Then something pulls me away and it all goes to hell again. The wind picked up, making the barn door creak. Somewhere a piece of loose tin banged against wood, rhythmic and grating. Where are the cattle? Elara asked. Sold most of them 2 years back when feed got expensive. Kept a dozen. They're up in the high pasture with the horses. He dismounted, helped her down. There's a creek that runs year-round up there, enough grass to keep them fed. I check on them when I'm here, move them when I need to. Elara walked toward the house, her boots kicking up dust. The porch steps groaned under her weight. One of them cracked clean through. She pushed open the door. It wasn't locked, probably couldn't be locked anymore, and stepped inside. The main room was a disaster. Dust covered everything. Animal droppings in the corners suggested raccoons or something worse had made themselves at home. The furniture was still there, a table, 3 chairs, a rocking chair by a cold fireplace, but all of it looked ready to splinter into kindling. Books lined one wall, their spines faded and warped. A calendar hung askew, still showing March 2 years prior. My father kept a clean house, Rowan said from the doorway. This would have killed him faster than his heart did. Elara ran her finger along the table, leaving a clean streak in the grime. When did he die? 3 years ago, winter. I found him in that chair. Rowan pointed to the rocking chair. Looked like he just fell asleep, except he was cold. I'm sorry. Don't be. He had a good life, mostly. Built this place from nothing, raised me alone after my mother died, taught me everything worth knowing. He walked to the fireplace, kicked at some old ash. Then I left and let it all rot. So that's on me. Elara looked around the room, trying to see past the decay to what it had been. The bones were good, solid logs, a stone fireplace that just needed cleaning, windows positioned to catch morning light. It wasn't hopeless, just neglected. Show me the rest, she said. Rowan led her through the house. 2 bedrooms, both small, both filthy. A kitchen with a stove that might still work if cleaned. A root cellar that smelled like mold and dead things. The whole place felt like it was holding its breath, waiting to see if anyone would care enough to save it. Back in the main room, Rowan leaned against the doorframe. Still think you made the right choice? Elara turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. The work would be brutal, months of scrubbing and hauling and fixing. And that was just the house. The barn would be worse, the fencing worse still. She had no idea how to do half of what needed doing, but she'd worked in a textile mill for 6 years. She knew about impossible tasks and endless hours and pushing through when everything in you wanted to quit. Where do you sleep when you're here? She asked. Barn, usually, less mess. Then I'll take one of the bedrooms. We'll clean them both out, get the stove working, make this place livable again. She met his eyes. Then we'll tackle the rest. You don't know what you're signing up for. Neither do you. Elara pulled off her gloves. You're getting a city girl who doesn't know a cow from a horse. I'm getting a falling down ranch in the middle of nowhere. We're both taking a risk. Rowan almost smiled. Almost. Fair enough. But don't say I didn't warn you. He went to get supplies from the barn while Elara stood in the main room, trying to figure out where to start. Everything needed cleaning, but she couldn't clean without water, couldn't heat water without the stove working, couldn't work the stove without clearing out the ash and checking the flue. She started with the fireplace, found an old ash bucket, scooped out years of accumulated debris, carried it outside and dumped it away from the house. 3 trips, and her hands were black, her dress streaked with soot, but the fireplace was clear. Rowan returned with an armload of wood and a bucket of water from the creek. Thought you might need this. I need about 20 more of those buckets. There's a pump out back. Hasn't worked in a while, but I can probably fix it. He dropped the wood by the hearth. Get a fire going first, takes the damp out of the air. By evening, they had a fire crackling in the fireplace, and the stove limping along on 3 working burners. Rowan had shot a rabbit on the way in, and Elara cooked it with some dried beans he'd found in the cellar. It wasn't good. The beans were old and the rabbit was tough, but it was hot and filling, and they ate it sitting on the porch steps, watching the sun set over the mountains. My father used to sit here every night, Rowan said. Said it reminded him why he stayed. Why did he stay? Freedom, mostly. He came west after the war, didn't want anyone telling him what to do ever again. Built this place with his own hands, ran it his own way. Rowan scraped the last of the beans from his plate. He was happy here, I think, at least until he got old and lonely. And you? Are you happy here? Rowan took his time answering. I don't know if happy's the right word, but it's mine. That counts for something. They sat in silence as the sky turned from orange to purple to black. Crickets started their nightly chorus. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. I'll sleep in the barn, Rowan said eventually, standing. You take the bedroom on the left. It's got fewer holes in the walls, door locks from the inside if you're worried. I'm not worried. He looked at her for a moment, then nodded. Well, good night then. Good night. Elara watched him walk to the barn, his silhouette dark against the firelight spilling from the house. Then she went inside, barred the door anyway, old habits, and made her way to the bedroom. It was as bad as she remembered. But she had clean blankets from her carpet bag and a determination not to complain. She spread the blankets on the bare mattress, placed her mother's silver brush on the windowsill, and lay down fully clothed. Through the wall she could hear mice scurrying. Through the window, the wind in the trees. It was nothing like Boston, nothing like the saloon. It was harsh and lonely and uncertain, but it was exactly what she'd asked for. She fell asleep planning tomorrow's work. The next weeks blurred together in a haze of labor. Elara woke before dawn, worked until dark, collapsed into bed too tired to dream. She scrubbed floors, hauled water, beat dust from blankets and curtains she'd found packed away in a trunk. She learned to work the pump. Rowan fixed it that first week and filled bucket after bucket until her shoulders screamed. She cleaned the stove until it shined, cleared out the root cellar and burned the moldy remains, washed every dish and pot and pan. Rowan worked outside, repairing fencing and shoring up the barn. He showed her how to feed the chickens he'd bought from a neighbor 20 miles away, how to collect eggs without getting pecked, how to tell if a hen was laying or just taking up space. He taught her to recognize the different bird song at dawn, to read weather in the clouds, to move through the house quietly so as not to startle the wildlife that had claimed it. They didn't talk much. Rowan wasn't a talker, and Alara was too exhausted for conversation. But they developed a rhythm. She'd have coffee ready when he came in from morning chores. He'd bring firewood in before dark. She cooked. He hunted. She mended his shirts. He fixed her broken chair. It wasn't friendship exactly, but it wasn't uncomfortable either. One morning, 3 weeks in, Alara found a ledger in the bottom of a trunk. She opened it carefully. The pages were brittle with age, and saw her father's handwriting. Rows of numbers, dates, transactions. The last entry was from 3 years ago, just before he died. She brought it to breakfast, where Rowan was eating the eggs she'd scrambled. "Did your father keep records of everything? Sales, expenses, inventory?" Rowan glanced at the ledger. "He was meticulous about it. Why?" "Because if we're going to make this ranch work, we need to know what worked before and what didn't." Alara flipped through the pages. He tracked cattle sales, feed costs, equipment repairs. "There's 3 years of data here. We can use it." "Use it how?" "To make decisions, to see patterns." She pointed to a column of numbers. "Look, he sold cattle every October right before winter. Prices were better then than spring. And he bought feed in bulk during summer when it was cheap." She looked up. "We should do the same." Rowan set down his fork. "You can read all that from those numbers?" "It's not that different from the mill. They tracked production, costs, efficiency. I learned to spot where we were losing money, where we could improve." She closed the ledger carefully. "Your father was smart. He ran this place like a business. We should too." Something shifted in Rowan's expression. Not quite surprise, but close. "All right. What do you suggest?" Alara spent the next hour going through the ledger with him, pointing out patterns and possibilities. By the end, they had a rough plan. Sell half the remaining cattle in October, use that money to buy feed and repair equipment, invest in more chickens since eggs could be sold year-round. "It's not much," Alara admitted, "but it's a start." Rowan looked at the ledger, then at her. "You're good at this." "I told you I could help with more than cleaning." "I know, I just didn't—" He stopped. "Never mind, let's do it your way and see what happens." The work got harder as summer deepened. The sun beat down merciless and hot. Alara learned to wrap her head in cloth to keep from burning, learned which hours were too brutal for outdoor work and which were merely miserable. She helped Rowan move cattle to better pasture, sitting on a borrowed horse and trying not to fall off while he guided the animals with a patience she hadn't known he possessed. One afternoon, a neighbor rode up, a grizzled man named Frank who ran a ranch 15 miles east. He looked Alara up and down with undisguised curiosity. "Didn't know you had a wife, Cade." "I don't," Rowan said evenly. "Miss Whitfield works here, helps run the place." Frank's eyebrows went up. "That's so. And what does Miss Whitfield do, exactly?" Alara stepped forward before Rowan could answer. "Bookkeeping, management, planning. Mr. Cade handles the physical labor. I handle everything else." "Bookkeeping." Frank chewed on that. "Fancy." "Necessary," Alara corrected. "You can't run a ranch on muscle alone. You need organization." Frank looked at Rowan. "She always this opinionated?" "Usually more," Rowan said, and Alara couldn't tell if he was annoyed or amused. Frank left shortly after, but not before telling Rowan he'd spread the word that the Cade Ranch was back in business. "Might get some buyers come fall. You're looking to sell cattle." After he rode off, Alara turned to Rowan. "Was that a problem, me talking to him?" "Should it be?" "I don't know the rules out here. Maybe women aren't supposed to speak for themselves." Rowan snorted. "Frank's old-fashioned, but he's not stupid. If you know what you're talking about, he'll listen. If you don't, he won't. Same as anyone. He paused. You handled him fine. It was the closest thing to praise he'd given her, and Alara found herself absurdly pleased. By August, the house was livable. The roof was patched, the windows repaired, the floors clean enough to walk barefoot. Alara had even coaxed some herbs to grow in a small garden behind the kitchen: sage, thyme, rosemary. Not much, but enough to make the food taste like something other than desperation. The barn was still a disaster, but Rowan was working on it methodically, replacing boards and reinforcing the frame. He'd moved back into the house, taking the second bedroom, and they settled into an easy domesticity that felt strange and comfortable at once. One evening, after a particularly long day of mending fences, they sat on the porch with coffee. The air had cooled finally, bringing the first hint of autumn. "I've been thinking," Rowan said. Alara waited. "You've been here 2 months, worked harder than anyone I've hired before. Never complained, never asked for anything." He stared out at the mountains. "What I'm saying is, you've earned a share." "A share of what?" "The ranch, the profits, when we start making them. You're not just working here anymore. You're building this place same as me." He glanced at her. "Seems fair you get something out of it besides room and board." Alara's throat tightened. "I didn't come here expecting—" "I know, but you've earned it anyway." He set down his coffee cup. "I'm not good at this, talking about things, making things official, but my father always said a man pays his debts, and I'm in debt to you for what you've done here." "You saved my life, Rowan. We're even." "No, we're not. I gave you a way out. You gave me back something I thought was dead." He gestured at the house, the barn, the land stretching out around them. "This place has a future again. That's because of you." Alara didn't know what to say. In Boston, in the saloon, she'd been invisible, a pair of hands, a body, something to be used and discarded. Here, she was a partner. It felt impossible and fragile and real. "Thank you," she managed. Rowan nodded, clearly relieved the conversation was over. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars came out, one by one. But the peace didn't last. 3 days later, Alara was in the garden pulling weeds when she heard horses. She straightened, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun. 3 riders were approaching from the south, moving fast. Rowan emerged from the barn, his hand already on his gun. The riders got closer, and Alara's stomach dropped. Gideon was in front. His right hand was bandaged, held awkwardly against his chest. Behind him rode the same 2 men from that night on the road. All 3 were armed, all 3 looked like they'd been riding for days. Rowan stepped in front of Alara. "Gideon!" "Cade." Gideon reined his horse to a stop 20 feet away. "Took me a while to find you, but I'm patient. What do you want?" "What's mine?" Gideon looked past Rowan to Alara. "The girl. She stole from me when she ran. Owes me money and work. I'm here to collect." "She doesn't owe you anything." "The law might say different. She signed a contract with Sam. That contract transferred to me when he died." Gideon's smile was ugly. "She's legally bound to work for me. Running away don't change that." "There's no law within 100 miles of here," Rowan said quietly, "so legal doesn't mean much." "Maybe not. But right's right." Gideon shifted in his saddle, his good hand near his gun. "I came all this way. I ain't leaving empty-handed." Alara stepped out from behind Rowan. "I'm not going back." "You don't got a choice, sweetheart." "Yes, I do, and I choose to stay here." Gideon's face darkened. "You think you're safe because Cade's got a gun? I got 2 men with me and more back in town. You're coming with me one way or another." "No," Alara said. "I'm not." Gideon drew his gun with his left hand, clumsy, but the barrel still pointed at her. "Last chance. Come peaceful or come bleeding, but you're coming." Rowan's gun cleared leather so fast Alara barely saw it move. "Put it down, Gideon." 3 against 1, Cade. You really want those odds?" "I'll take those odds over letting you touch her again." For a moment, the world balanced on a knife's edge. Alara could hear her own heartbeat, the wind in the grass, one of the horses snorting. Then Gideon thumbed back the hammer. "Your choice." The shot cracked out before Alara could scream. But it wasn't Gideon who fired. Rowan's bullet caught Gideon's gun hand, the left one this time. and the weapon spun away. Gideon howled, clutching his arm. The two men behind him went for their guns, but Rowan's revolver swung toward them. "Don't," Rowan said. Just that one word, cold and final. They froze. Rowan walked forward slowly, gun never wavering. "Here's how this ends. You three ride back wherever you came from. You don't come back. You don't send anyone else. You tell people Alara died in the wilderness, or ran off to California, or whatever story lets you save face. But you leave her alone." "She's mine," Gideon started, but Rowan cut him off. "She was never yours. She's not property. She's not a thing to be owned." He cocked the revolver again. "And if I see you on this land again, I'll put the next bullet somewhere it'll do more than sting." Gideon's face twisted with rage and pain and humiliation. "You're dead, Cade. You and her both. Maybe not today, but soon. Maybe, but not by you." Rowan gestured with the gun. "Now get out." The two other men grabbed Gideon's reins, turned the horses. Gideon twisted in the saddle to look back at Alara. "This ain't over," he said. Then they were gone, galloping south, leaving dust and threats behind them. Rowan stood there until they disappeared over the rise. Then he holstered his gun and turned to Alara. "You all right?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. Her hands were shaking. "He meant what he said," Rowan continued. "He'll come back. Maybe not tomorrow or next week, but eventually. Men like that can't let things go." "I know. So you need to decide. You can leave. I'll take you to the nearest town, put you on a stage going anywhere you want. You'll be safe." He met her eyes. "Or you can stay. But staying means this might happen again, means you might have to fight." Alara looked at the house, the barn, the garden where her herbs grew. She thought about the ledger and the plans they'd made, the cattle they'd sell in October, the future they were building. "I'm staying," she said. "And if Gideon comes back, I'll be ready." Rowan studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded like he'd expected nothing less. "Then we better start preparing," he said, "because next time he won't come alone." The next morning, Rowan taught Alara to shoot. They walked to a clearing beyond the barn where he'd set up targets, old bottles and rusted cans balanced on fence posts. The revolver felt heavy and wrong in her hand, like it belonged to someone else's life. "Hold it like this," Rowan said, adjusting her grip. "Two hands, firm but not tight. You strangle it, your aim goes to hell." Alara tried to copy his stance, but everything felt awkward. "I don't think I can do this." "You can. You just haven't done it yet." He stepped behind her, reached around to guide her arms into position. "See that bottle? Don't think about hitting it. Just focus on keeping the gun steady and squeezing the trigger slow." She fired. The recoil jerked her arms up, the shot went wide, and her ears rang from the blast. "Again," Rowan said. She fired 5 more times, missed every shot. Her arms ached, her hands trembled from gripping too hard, and frustration burned in her chest. "This is pointless. I'm never going to—" Again. Alara gritted her teeth, raised the gun, fired. The bottle exploded in a spray of glass. She stared at the empty fence post, not quite believing it. "There," Rowan said. "Now do it 20 more times so your body remembers." They spent 2 hours in that clearing. By the end, Alara could hit 3 out of 5 targets, and her hands had stopped shaking. It wasn't good, but it was better than helpless. "Gideon won't expect you to fight back," Rowan said as they walked back to the house. "That's an advantage. He thinks women fold under pressure. Prove him wrong, and he'll hesitate. Hesitation gets people killed." "You sound like you've done this before." "Done what?" "Taught someone to survive." Rowan was quiet for a moment. "My father taught me the same way after my mother died. Said the world was hard and getting harder, and I needed to be harder than it." He glanced at her. "Worked for me. Might work for you too." Over the next weeks, shooting practice became part of their routine. Dawn and dusk, Alara would spend 30 minutes at the targets while Rowan corrected her stance, her breathing, her aim. She got better slowly, her accuracy improving from terrible to merely poor. But she could load the revolver now without fumbling, could draw it from her belt without dropping it, could fire without flinching. It wasn't enough to make her dangerous, but it was enough to make her less of a victim. Meanwhile, The ranch work continued. September arrived with cooler nights and the first hints of color in the aspens. Alara organized the cattle sale for October, writing to potential buyers and arranging transport. Rowan reinforced the barn's foundation and replaced the worst of the rotten boards. Together they inventoried supplies, planned for winter, argued over whether to invest in more chickens or save the money for emergencies. They argued about a lot of things, actually. Alara wanted to expand the egg business. Rowan thought it was a waste of time. Rowan wanted to buy another horse. Alara insisted they couldn't afford it. She thought his fencing repairs were sloppy. He thought her bookkeeping was obsessive. But the arguments never turned mean, never crossed into actual anger. They were just two people trying to build something neither quite knew how to build, stumbling through it together. One evening in late September, Frank rode up again with a proposition. "Got a buyer interested in your cattle," he said, settling into the chair Alara offered him. "Man named Garrett from 2 territories over. He'll pay fair price, maybe better than fair if the stock's healthy." "When?" Rowan asked. 3 weeks. He's doing a circuit, buying from several ranches. I can put you on his list if you're interested." Alara pulled out the ledger, checked the numbers. "We've got 8 head ready to sell. If Garrett's price is decent, we'll make enough to cover winter supplies and have some left over." Frank peered at the ledger. "You keep books like that regular?" "Every transaction, every expense." Alara showed him the columns. "It's the only way to know if we're making money or just burning it." "Huh." Frank looked at Rowan. "You found yourself a smart one." "I know," Rowan said, and Alara felt an unexpected warmth at the simple acknowledgement. After Frank left, they spent the evening planning for the sale. 8 cattle would bring in roughly $300 if Garrett paid the going rate. Half would go to winter feed and supplies. The rest could repair the barn's roof or buy equipment or stockpile for emergencies. "We should save it," Alara said, writing figures in the ledger. "Winter's unpredictable. If we get snowed in or lose stock, we'll need reserves. Or we invest it in spring calves and grow the herd. Too risky. One bad season and we're broke." Rowan leaned back in his chair. "You always this cautious?" "I'm practical. There's a difference." Sometimes practical's just another word for scared. Alara set down her pencil. "I worked 6 years in a mill where one missed paycheck meant going hungry. I watched women get sick because they couldn't afford a doctor, watched families get thrown out when they fell behind on rent. So yes, I'm cautious, because I've seen what happens when you're not." Rowan studied her face. "Fair enough. We'll save half, invest half, split the risk." It was a compromise, and Alara wasn't used to those. In Boston, you took what was offered or you got nothing. Here, decisions were negotiated, debated, shared. It felt strange and good, and a little frightening, this partnership they were building. The cattle sale went smoothly. Garrett arrived on schedule with 4 hired hands and wagons to transport the stock. He examined each animal carefully, checking teeth and hooves and general health, then offered $280 for the lot. "That's fair," Alara said before Rowan could counter. She'd researched prices, knew what the market would bear. "We'll take it." Garrett counted out the money while his men loaded the cattle. "You've got good stock here, Cade. Healthy, well-fed. You keep producing quality like this, I'll buy from you every year." After they left, Rowan handed half the money to Alara. "Your share." She stared at the bills. "This is too much." "It's what we agreed. Partners split profits." He pocketed his half. "Use it however you want. Save it, spend it, burn it. Your money, your choice." Alara had never held this much money at once in her life. In Boston, her wages went straight to rent and food, leaving nothing for herself. This felt impossible, like it might vanish if she looked away. She put it in the metal box she'd found in the cellar, locked it, and hid the key in her room. Then she went back to work, trying to ignore the fact that for the first time since leaving home, she had options. October brought the first snow, just a dusting that melted by noon, but a reminder that winter was coming. Alara and Rowan spent their days preparing. They insulated the house with mud and straw, chopped enough firewood to fill the shed twice over, bought supplies from the trading post 20 miles south: flour, salt, coffee, sugar, dried beans, lamp oil, ammunition. Everything they'd need to survive until spring. The work was endless and exhausting, and Alara fell into bed each night too tired to think. But she was getting stronger. Her hands had calluses now, her arms had muscle. She could chop wood for an hour without stopping, could haul water buckets that would have broken her back 2 months ago. She was becoming someone she didn't quite recognize, someone harder, tougher, less afraid. One evening in mid-October, she was washing dishes when Rowan came in from checking the horses. His face was grim. "We've got a problem." Alara dried her hands. "What kind of problem?" "Found tracks by the north pasture. 4 horses, maybe 5. Fresh, probably from this morning." He set his rifle by the door. "Someone's watching us." The warmth drained from the room. "Gideon?" "Most likely. He's been quiet too long. I figured he was licking his wounds, but quiet men are the dangerous ones." Rowan walked to the window, looked out at the darkening sky. "They're scouting, learning our routine, our weak points. When they know enough, they'll move." "When?" "Soon. Maybe tonight, maybe next week. But soon." Alara felt fear coil in her stomach, cold and familiar. She'd felt this way in the saloon, waiting for Gideon to come to her room. The helplessness of knowing something bad was coming and being unable to stop it. But she wasn't in the saloon anymore, and she wasn't helpless. "What do we do?" she asked. Rowan turned from the window. "We prepare. You sleep with your gun loaded. I'll keep watch tonight. You take tomorrow night. We don't go anywhere alone. We stay alert." He paused. "And if they come, we fight." That night, Alara lay in bed fully clothed, revolver on the nightstand, listening to every sound. The wind rattling the shutters, the house settling, mice in the walls. Each noise made her heart jump, her hand reach for the gun. Around midnight, she heard footsteps outside her door. She grabbed the revolver, pointed it at the door, finger on the trigger. "It's me," Rowan said quietly. "Just checking the house." Alara lowered the gun, her hands shaking. "Anything?" "Not yet. Try to sleep." But sleep was impossible. She lay there until dawn, watching shadows move across the ceiling, imagining Gideon's face in every dark corner. The next day passed in tense silence. Rowan worked close to the house, checking lines of sight, identifying cover, planning for a fight. Alara stayed inside, watching through windows, jumping at every distant sound. By evening, her nerves were scraped raw. "Maybe they're not coming," she said as they ate a silent dinner. Maybe Gideon gave up. Rowan didn't look up from his plate. Men like Gideon don't give up. They just wait for the right moment. And if that moment never comes, we can't live like this forever, waiting for an attack that might not happen. "It'll happen." Rowan met her eyes. "Question is whether we're ready when it does." Alara's watch started at midnight. Rowan showed her the position he'd been using, a chair by the front window with clear views of the approach from the south and east. He left her the rifle, took his revolver to his room. "Anything moves out there, you wake me," he said. "Don't try to handle it yourself." "I won't." "I mean it, Alara. You see something, you get me. Pride gets people killed." "I said I won't." He nodded, then hesitated like he wanted to say something else. But he just went to his room and closed the door. Alara settled into the chair, rifle across her lap. The night was quiet except for the usual sounds, wind, animals, the creak of wood. The moon was 3/4 full, bright enough to cast shadows. She watched the darkness and thought about how far she'd come. 3 months ago, she'd been trapped in a saloon, property and everything but name. Now she sat with a rifle, guarding land she'd helped rebuild, waiting for a fight she was at least partially prepared for. It wasn't the life she'd imagined when she left Boston, but it was hers, and she'd be damned if she let Gideon take it. The attack came just before dawn. Alara saw the movement first, shapes detaching from the tree line, moving low and fast toward the barn. She counted 4, maybe 5 men. They spread out, converging on the house from different angles. She ran to Rowan's room, pounded on the door. "They're here!" He was up instantly, fully dressed, gun in hand. "How many?" 4 or 5, coming from the south and west. "Get to the kitchen window. Cover that side. I'll take the front." He grabbed extra ammunition. "Don't shoot unless you have a clear target, and stay low." They took positions. Alara crouched by the kitchen window, rifle braced on the sill. Her heart hammered so hard she could barely breathe. Through the window, she could see shapes moving in the pre-dawn light. A voice called out, Gideon's voice, slurred and angry. "Cade, send out the girl and we'll leave peaceful. Keep her and we burn you out." Rowan didn't answer. "I'm counting to 10, Gideon shouted. "Then we start shooting." He got to 7 before the first shot cracked out. Not from Gideon, but from one of his men. The bullet punched through a shutter, buried itself in the wall above Alara's head. Rowan returned fire immediately. Alara heard his rifle bark once, twice. Someone outside screamed. "Alara!" Rowan called. "West window, 2 men moving on the barn." She shifted position, saw the figures. They were carrying torches. They were going to burn the barn. She aimed, squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked hard against her shoulder. One of the torches fell, guttered out in the dirt. The man who'd been carrying it scrambled for cover. "Good shot," Rowan said. "Keep them pinned." For the next 15 minutes, the world was noise and smoke and terror. Bullets slammed into the house from multiple directions. Rowan fired methodically, conserving ammunition. Alara shot at anything that moved, her accuracy terrible but her volume enough to keep the attackers from advancing. Then fire bloomed in the darkness. The barn was burning despite their efforts. Orange flames climbed the walls, hungry and fast. "No," Alara whispered. They'd worked so hard on that barn. "Focus," Rowan snapped. "Barn's just wood." "You're not!" More shots. Someone kicked at the back door, trying to force it. Alara ran to that window, fired through it blind. The kicking stopped. But they were running out of ammunition. Alara had maybe 10 rounds left, Rowan not many more. "We can't hold them much longer," she said. "We don't have to." Rowan pointed to the east, where the sky was lightening. "Sun's coming up. They lose their cover. They'll pull back." He was right. As dawn broke, the shooting slowed, then stopped. Alara saw figures retreating toward the tree line, dragging at least one wounded man. The barn was fully engulfed now, flames reaching toward the sky. Gideon's voice called out one last time. "This ain't over, Cade. You hear me? I'll be back, and next time I'll bring enough men to bury you both." Then they were gone, fading into the trees, leaving destruction and smoke behind. Alara and Rowan stayed at their positions for another hour, making sure it wasn't a trick. When the sun was fully up and nothing moved in the trees, Rowan finally stood. "Check yourself," he said. "You hit?" Alara looked down at her hands, her arms, half expecting to find blood. But she was whole, uninjured except for a bruise on her shoulder from the rifle's recoil. "I'm fine. You?" "Same." Rowan walked to the door, opened it carefully, looked out. "Barn's a loss. House took some damage, but nothing we can't fix." They went outside together. The barn was a smoking ruin, nothing left but charred beams and ash. The chickens had scattered during the fight. Alara could see a few in the distance, survivors. The horses had broken out of the burning barn and were grazing nervously in the far pasture. Near the tree line, they found blood. A lot of it. "Hit at least 2 of them," Rowan said, studying the trail. "Maybe killed one." "Good," Alara said, and meant it. She waited to feel guilty about that, but nothing came. Just a cold satisfaction that they'd hurt the men trying to hurt them. They spent the day assessing damage and securing the property. The house had bullet holes, but the structure was sound. They'd lost the barn, some equipment, and half the chickens. But they were alive, and Gideon hadn't won. That evening, they sat on the porch watching the sun set behind the mountains. The smell of smoke still hung in the air. "He'll come back," Alara said. It wasn't a question. "Probably." "What do we do?" Rowan was quiet for a long time. "We could run. Pack up, head somewhere he'd never find us. Start over." "Is that what you want?" "No." He looked at the land, the house they'd rebuilt, the pastures they'd tended, the mountains standing eternal in the distance. "This is mine. My father's before me. I'm not giving it up because some drunk with a grudge wants what he can't have." Alara thought about Boston, the saloon, all the time she'd run or submitted or compromised to survive. Thought about the woman she'd been 3 months ago, frightened, desperate, willing to accept scraps. She wasn't that woman anymore. Then we stay, she said. And if Gideon comes back, we make sure he regrets it. Rowan looked at her, something like approval in his eyes. You've changed. Had to. The old me wouldn't have survived out here. The old you survived plenty. He stood, stretched. But I like this version better. Over the next weeks, they fortified. Rowan built a new structure to house the horses, smaller than the barn, easier to defend. They stockpiled ammunition and supplies. Rowan taught Alara to shoot rifles, pistols, and eventually a shotgun that kicked hard enough to bruise her entire shoulder. Frank came by to check on them after hearing about the attack. He offered to spread word among the neighbors, see if anyone would help keep watch. We're all right, Rowan said, but I appreciate it. Frank looked at the burned barn, the bullet-scarred house. You need help, you ask. Most folks out here don't take kindly to the kind of violence Gideon's bringing. After he left, Alara turned to Rowan. Why didn't you ask for help? Because this is our fight, and I don't want to owe anyone. Even if it means we might lose. We're not going to lose. He said it with such certainty that Alara almost believed him. November came with cold winds and gray skies. The first real snow fell, covering the burned patch where the barn had stood. Alara and Rowan settled into winter routine, feeding animals, maintaining equipment, keeping the fire going day and night. They talked more now, during the long evenings, with nothing to do but wait out the dark. Rowan told her about his childhood on the ranch, the hard years after his mother died, the way his father had taught him to read using old newspapers and the Bible. Alara told him about Boston, the mill, her mother coughing up blood and working anyway because stopping meant starving. You ever miss it? Rowan asked one night. The city, I mean. No. Alara didn't have to think about it. I missed the idea of civilization. Doctors, stores, other people. But the reality was just different walls on the same cage. She looked around the small room, the firelight dancing on the walls. This is hard, but it's honest. I know exactly where I stand. And where's that? On my own ground, making my own choices. She met his eyes. That's worth more than all the civilization in the world. Rowan nodded slowly. My father used to say freedom's the only thing worth dying for. Took me years to understand what he meant. And now? Now I think he was right. He stood, added wood to the fire. You want more coffee? It was a simple question, domestic and ordinary, but it felt like something more. An acknowledgement of the life they were building together, the partnership that had deepened from convenience into something approaching trust. Yes, Alara said. I'd like that. December arrived with brutal cold and snow that piled 3 feet deep. They were snowed in for a week, unable to check on the distant cattle, barely able to get to the makeshift horse shelter. But they had enough supplies, enough firewood, enough of everything that mattered. On Christmas Eve, not that they celebrated, but the calendar said so, Alara made a special dinner with the last of the dried apples and some flour she'd been saving. It wasn't much, but it was better than their usual beans and salt pork. This is good, Rowan said, genuinely surprised. My mother taught me. She could make a feast from nothing. Alara picked at her own plate. I wish you could have met her. I think you'd have liked each other. Tell me about her. So Alara did. She talked about her mother's strength, her stubborn refusal to quit even when dying, her absolute certainty that Alara deserved better than the mill. She talked about the goodbye they'd had, her mother too weak to stand but still insisting Alara take the mail-order bride chance. She told me to be brave, Alara said quietly. Said brave didn't mean not being scared. It meant being scared and doing it anyway. Smart woman. She was. Alara swallowed hard. I hope she'd be proud of who I've become. Rowan looked at her across the table. I think she would be. They sat in comfortable silence, eating the simple meal, while outside the snow fell thick and quiet, covering the world in white. The snow melted in late February, revealing a landscape Alara had almost forgotten. Brown earth, dead grass, the skeleton of the burned barn still standing like a monument to Gideon's violence. They'd survived the winter, barely. 3 cattle had died in a late blizzard, and they'd run dangerously low on feed, but they'd made it through. Rowan was checking the fence line when Alara saw the rider approaching from the south. Her hand went to the rifle leaning against the porch rail, but as the figure got closer, she recognized Frank's gray horse. He He looked grim when he dismounted. "Got news," Frank said without preamble. "Gideon's been recruiting. Word is he's got 8, maybe 10 men now. They've been drinking and talking big about coming up here soon as the road's clear." Ilara's stomach dropped. When? Could be days, could be weeks, but it's coming. Frank glanced toward where Rowan was walking back from the pasture. "You two need to think hard about what you're doing. 10 armed men against 2 of you. Those ain't odds anyone survives." "We're not leaving," Ilara said. "Then you're fools." Frank's voice was sharp. "I admire what you've built here. I do. But it ain't worth dying over." Rowan reached the porch, read the situation immediately. "Gideon?" "Coming with an army," Frank confirmed. "I'm telling you the same thing I told her. Leave while you can. Let him have the land. It's just dirt and wood." "It's more than that." Rowan looked at Ilara, then back to Frank. "And we're staying." Frank shook his head. "Then I'll spread word, see if I can get some neighbors willing to help. But most folks won't risk their necks for someone else's fight." After he left, Ilara and Rowan stood on the porch in silence. 10 men. Even with all their preparations, all their practice, those numbers were impossible. "We could set traps," Ilara said finally. "Make it harder for them to approach. Even the odds a little." "Won't be enough." "Maybe not. But it's something." She looked at him. "Unless you want to run?" "Do you?" Ilara thought about it honestly. Running meant safety, at least temporarily. But it also meant abandoning everything they'd built, letting Gideon win, proving that violence and intimidation always triumphed. It meant going back to being the woman who accepted whatever scraps life offered. "No," she said. "I want to fight." "Then we fight." Rowan's jaw set hard. "But we fight smart. We use the terrain, we force them to come at us where we're strongest, and we make every shot count." They spent the next week preparing. Rowan dug rifle pits at strategic points around the house, piled rocks for cover, cleared sight lines. Ilara inventoried their ammunition. They had maybe 200 rounds total, not nearly enough for a prolonged fight. She made trips to the creek for extra water, stockpiled food in the house, prepared bandages and supplies for wounds they'd likely take. At night, they refined their plan. The house was their fortress. If Gideon attacked during the day, they'd use the rifle pits for cover and fall back to the house when necessary. If he attacked at night, they'd fight from inside, using the darkness against him. "What if they try to burn us out again?" Ilara asked. "Then we make sure they pay for getting close enough." Rowan checked his revolver for the 100th time. "Fire works both ways." 3 days later, a rider approached carrying a white cloth tied to a stick. Rowan and Ilara watched from the house as he stopped 50 yards out. "Message from Gideon Cross," the man shouted. "He's willing to negotiate." "Like hell he is," Ilara muttered. Rowan called back. "What's he want?" "He'll leave you alone permanent if you give him the girl. She goes back willing. He forgets about all this." Ilara felt ice in her veins. "Don't you dare! Tell Gideon to go to hell," Rowan shouted. "And you get off my land before I shoot you for trespassing." The rider hesitated, then wheeled his horse and galloped away. "That was stupid," Ilara said. "You should have pretended to consider it. Bought us more time." "No." Rowan's voice was flat. "Because that's not a choice. Never was, never will be. You're not a bargaining chip." Something in Ilara's chest tightened. She'd spent so much of her life being traded, sold, negotiated over. The fact that Rowan refused to even pretend felt like something precious and rare. "Thank you," she said quietly. He looked at her for a long moment. "You don't have to thank me for basic decency." "Yes, I do, because it's rarer than you think." That night, neither of them slept. They took turns on watch, waiting for an attack that didn't come. Dawn broke gray and cold, and still nothing. "Maybe he changed his mind," Ilara said without conviction. "No, he's just making us wait, making us nervous." Rowan poured coffee with steady hands. "It's a tactic, wears you down before the fight even starts." He was right. By the 3rd day of waiting, Ilara's nerves were scraped raw. Every sound made her jump, every shadow looked like an attacker. She couldn't eat, could barely sleep. The anticipation was worse than actual violence. On the 4th day, Frank rode up again with 2 other men Ilara didn't recognize. "These are the Keller brothers," Frank said. They've got a ranch east of here. Heard about your situation and figured they'd help even the odds. The Kellers were in their 30s, quiet men with weathered faces and rifles that looked well used. They nodded to Alara and Rowan, but didn't waste time on pleasantries. We've had run-ins with Gideon before, the older one said. He tried to drive us off our land 2 years back. We fought him off, but just barely. Figure if he wins here, he'll come for us next. So this is self-interest, the younger one added. Not charity. We fight together or we die separate. Rowan shook their hands. Either way, I'm grateful. With the Kellers and Frank, they now numbered 5 against Gideon's 10. Still bad odds, but better than before. They refined the defensive plan, assigned positions, made sure everyone knew the terrain and the fallback points. That night, Alara found Rowan outside staring at the mountains. You all right? She asked. Thinking about my father, what he'd say about all this. What would he say? Probably that I was an idiot for not running when I had the chance. Rowan smiled slightly. But he'd also say some things are worth fighting for, even if the fight's impossible. Is that what this is? Impossible? Maybe. Probably. He turned to face her. But I realized something these past months. This place, this land, it's not just dirt and wood like Frank said. It's proof that I can build something that lasts, that I'm not just drifting anymore. And me? Alara asked. What am I? Rowan looked at her for a long moment. You're the reason it matters. Before you came, I was maintaining this place out of obligation, going through the motions because my father expected it. But you made me want to actually succeed, made me remember why I came back in the first place. Alara's throat tightened. I'm not good at this. Talking about feelings. Me neither. Rowan stepped closer. But if we die tomorrow, I want you to know, you saved this ranch, and maybe you saved me too. Before Alara could respond, before she could figure out what to say to that, a shout came from the house. One of the Kellers was pointing south. Torches. At least a dozen of them, moving through the darkness toward the ranch. They're here, Frank called out. Everyone moved to their positions. Alara ran to the house, grabbed her rifle, took her assigned spot at the east window. Through the glass, she could see the torches spreading out, surrounding them. Gideon's voice rang out across the distance. Last chance, Cade. Send out the girl or we burn everything. Rowan's answer was a rifle shot that knocked the torch from the nearest man's hand. Then all hell broke loose. The attackers came from 3 sides at once, using the darkness and superior numbers to their advantage. Muzzle flashes lit up the night like lightning. Bullets slammed into the house, shattered windows, tore chunks from the walls. Alara fired methodically, trying to make every shot count, but it was chaos. She couldn't tell if she was hitting anything. Beside her, the older Keller was firing steadily, his face calm despite the noise. Aim low, he said. Harder to miss that way. Alara adjusted, fired again. Someone screamed in the darkness. Outside, Rowan and the younger Keller were in one of the rifle pits, pouring fire into Gideon's men as they tried to advance. Frank was in another pit, his rifle cracking like thunder. But the attackers kept coming. One made it to the house's south wall, started piling brush against it. Alara saw him through a gap in the boards, shot through the wall. The man fell, the brush scattered. They're trying to flank, the Keller beside her shouted. West side! Alara ran to the west window, saw 2 men circling toward Rowan's position. She fired, missed, fired again. One went down, the other retreated. The fight raged for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. The noise was deafening, the smoke choking. Alara's ears rang, her shoulder ached from the rifle's recoil, and she was running low on ammunition. Then she heard Rowan shout, Fall back to the house! He and the younger Keller scrambled from their pit, running low as bullets kicked up dirt around them. They made it to the porch, dove through the door. Frank followed seconds later. They're massing for a final push, Rowan gasped, reloading frantically. We bloodied them good, but they're still coming. As if to prove his point, Gideon's voice rang out again. Rush them, all at once! Alara saw the shapes moving in the darkness, at least 6 men charging the house from different angles. She fired, worked the bolt, fired again. Beside her, everyone was shooting, a concentrated wall of lead, but there were too many attackers. One made it to the porch. Rowan shot him point blank through the door. Another reached a window, started climbing through. The older Keller hit him with a rifle butt, sent him sprawling back. But then Alara's rifle clicked empty. She grabbed her revolver, kept firing, but she only had 6 shots, and then that was empty too. "I'm out!" she shouted. "Here!" Frank tossed her a box of rifle cartridges. She fumbled to reload, her hands shaking so badly she dropped half the rounds. Someone was kicking at the back door, trying to break it down. Rowan ran to brace it, firing through the wood. This was it. They were going to be overrun. Then a different sound cut through the chaos, a rifle shot from an unexpected direction. Then another, and another. Through the smoke, Alara saw torches falling, Gideon's men scattering. More rifle fire coming from the north and east. Reinforcements. "That's the Hendersons," Frank said, grinning wildly. "And the Pratts. I sent word to every ranch within 2 days' ride. Looks like some of them came through." The tide turned. Caught between the defenders in the house and the new arrivals outside, Gideon's men broke. They scattered into the darkness, running for their horses, abandoning their wounded. Gideon himself was the last to leave. Alara saw him in the firelight, his face twisted with rage and something that might have been fear. He looked directly at the house, directly at her, and she saw the promise in his eyes. This wasn't over. Then he was gone, swallowed by darkness. The shooting stopped. For a moment, everything was silent except for the ringing in Alara's ears and the crackle of small fires burning where torches had fallen. Then people started moving, calling out, checking for injuries. Rowan threw open the door, stepped onto the porch. 5 riders were approaching, neighbors Alara had never met, men who'd risked their lives for strangers. The lead rider was an older man with an impressive beard. "Henderson," he said, tipping his hat. "Sorry we're late. Roads were hell." "You're right on time," Rowan said, his voice rough with emotion. "Can't thank you enough." "Save it. We're not done yet." Henderson pointed south. "They're regrouping down by the creek. We can finish this now or wait for them to try again." Rowan looked at Alara. She read the question in his eyes, keep fighting or let them go. Every part of her was exhausted, but she thought about Gideon's face, that promise of return, thought about living the rest of her life waiting for another attack, always looking over her shoulder. "Finish it," she said. Rowan nodded, turned to Henderson. "Let's go." "I'm coming too," Alara said. "No, you're hurt." Alara looked down, surprised to see blood on her sleeve. She hadn't even felt the bullet graze her. "I'm fine, and this is my fight as much as yours." Rowan started to argue, then stopped. "All right, but you stay behind me." They rode out with Henderson and his men, 10 riders strong. The Kellers and Frank stayed to guard the house. Alara sat behind Rowan on his horse, her revolver reloaded and ready. They found Gideon's group at the creek, just like Henderson said. The men were arguing among themselves, some wanting to retreat, others pushing to attack again. They had 6 left. The rest were dead, wounded, or had run. Gideon stood in the center, still defiant despite the blood running down his face from a head wound. Henderson's group surrounded them, rifles ready. "It's over, Gideon," Rowan called out. "You can leave now and never come back, or you can die here. Your choice." Gideon's laugh was bitter. "You think this ends it? You think I'm just going to walk away after everything? You don't have another option." "I always got options." Gideon's hand moved toward his gun. 3 rifles cracked simultaneously. Gideon dropped, clutching his leg. His gun fell into the creek. "Next one goes in your chest," Henderson said calmly. "Now you and your boys are going to ride south and keep riding. If I hear you're within 100 miles of here again, I'll hunt you down myself, and I ain't as patient as Cade." One of Gideon's men helped him onto a horse. Blood poured from his leg, soaking his pants, dripping into the water. He looked at Alara one last time, and she saw something break in his eyes. Not his body. That would heal. But his certainty, his sense of inevitable victory, that was gone. "This ain't," he started. "Yeah, it is," Alara cut him off. "It's over. You lost. Now leave before we change our minds about letting you live." Gideon and his remaining men rode away, heading south into the pre-dawn darkness. Alara watched until they disappeared, feeling something loosen in her chest. The fear she'd carried for months, the constant threat hanging over everything, it was gone. Back at the ranch, as the sun rose over the mountains, they assessed the damage. The house had taken heavy fire, but nothing that couldn't be repaired. 2 of Henderson's men had minor wounds. One of Gideon's men lay dead near the porch. They buried him away from the property, marking the grave with rocks. "You folks need anything, you let us know," Henderson said before leaving with his men. "That's how it works out here. We look after each other." After everyone left, Ilara and Rowan stood in the main room, surrounded by bullet holes and broken glass and the debris of battle. "We should start cleaning," Ilara said. "We should sleep first. It's been a long night." "I'm too wired to sleep." "Then sit with me." Rowan sank into a chair, exhaustion written across his face. "Just for a minute." Ilara sat. Her arm throbbed where the bullet had grazed it. Her ears still rang, and she was pretty sure she had bruises everywhere. But they'd won. Against impossible odds, they'd survived. "You think he'll really stay away?" she asked. "Gideon?" Rowan considered. "Yeah, we broke something in him tonight. And even if he's stupid enough to try again, now everyone knows what he is. He can't recruit an army when people know he's a coward who runs when things get hard." Ilara nodded. It made sense. Gideon's power had always come from fear and intimidation. Hard to intimidate people after they'd driven you off bleeding. "What now?" she asked. "Now we rebuild. Again." Rowan looked around the damaged room. "Seems like that's all we ever do." "I don't mind. Rebuilding means we're still here." "True enough." He met her eyes. "You did good tonight. Real good." "So did you." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun climbed higher, warming the room. Outside, the chickens were clucking, oblivious to the night's violence. Life going on, same as always. Spring arrived slowly that year, but it came. Ilara and Rowan repaired the house, replaced the broken windows, patched the bullet holes. They built a new barn, smaller than before but solid. The cattle they'd kept through winter had calves, and Ilara's careful management meant they had enough feed to support the growing herd. Frank came by regularly, often bringing his wife, a sharp-eyed woman named Martha, who immediately liked Ilara and wasn't shy about saying the ranch needed a woman's touch in more ways than one. The Kellers visited too, and Henderson, and slowly a community formed, neighbors who actually helped each other instead of just coexisting. By summer, the ranch was thriving. Ilara's ledger showed actual profit for the first time. They bought more chickens, invested in equipment, hired a hand to help with the heavy work. Rowan stopped drifting. There was too much to do. And besides, he said, he'd found what he'd been looking for all those years on the road. One evening in late July, they sat on the new porch watching the sunset. The mountains were purple in the fading light. The air smelled like wildflowers, and everything felt impossibly peaceful. "I've been thinking," Rowan said. "About?" "Making this official. The partnership, I mean." He pulled a paper from his pocket. "Had a lawyer in town draw this up. It splits the ranch 50-50 between us. Equal shares, equal say in all decisions." Ilara took the paper, read it carefully. It was exactly what he said, a legal partnership that gave her half of everything, security she'd never dreamed of having. "Why?" she asked. "Because it's fair. You built this place as much as I did. More, maybe. And if something happens to me, I want to know you'll be taken care of." He paused. "Plus, Martha said if I didn't make it official soon, she was going to come out here and kick my ass for being an idiot." Ilara laughed, surprising herself. "Martha's a wise woman." "She is." Rowan pulled out a pen. "So what do you say? Partners for real?" Ilara thought about the girl who'd stepped off that stagecoach 9 months ago, desperate, frightened, willing to accept any promise that sounded better than what she had. That girl wouldn't recognize the woman she'd become, wouldn't recognize this life, this strength, this freedom. "Partners," she said, and signed her name. 2 years later, Ilara stood in the same spot, watching the same sunset, but everything was different. The ranch had doubled in size. They'd bought the neighboring property when the owner retired. The herd numbered 40 head, the chickens produced enough eggs to sell to 3 different towns, and they'd hired 2 permanent hands to help manage it all. Frank and Martha had become like family, along with the Kellers and the Hendersons and a dozen other neighbors who'd woven themselves into Ilara's life. She'd learned to rope cattle, to doctor sick animals, to read weather patterns and predict storms. She could outshoot most men in the territory and had the calluses to prove she could work as hard as any of them. Rowan came out to join her, wiping his hands on a rag. "Dinner's almost ready." "You cooked?" "Don't sound so surprised. I'm not completely useless in a kitchen." "Just mostly useless." He grinned, wrapped an arm around her waist. They'd been married 6 months, a small ceremony with neighbors as witnesses. Nothing fancy, but it had felt right. Not because she needed a husband to be complete, but because they'd built something together that was worth making permanent. "You happy?" Rowan asked. Alara considered the question honestly. Was she happy? Her hands were rough, her back ached from a day spent mending fence, and there was a storm coming that would probably mean 3 days of brutal work. But she owned this land, had helped build this success, made her own choices every single day. "Yeah," she said, "I'm happy." And she was. Not the fragile happiness of those first letters from Samuel Whitmore, built on lies and desperation. This was something harder, earned through sweat and blood and refusal to quit. This was the happiness of knowing she belonged to no one but herself, that she'd survived the worst and come out stronger. A year after that, their daughter was born, screaming and red-faced and perfect. They named her Rose, after Rowan's mother. Martha helped with the delivery, staying for a week afterward to teach Alara how to manage a ranch and a baby at the same time. "It's not easy," Martha said, watching Alara try to nurse while reviewing the ranch's books. "But you're tougher than most. You'll figure it out." And she did. Rose grew up running through the pastures, learning to ride before she could write, collecting eggs and chasing chickens. By the time she was 5, she could tell you the price of cattle and the best time to sell hay. She had Rowan's stubborn streak and Alara's sharp mind, and between them, they'd created something neither had imagined possible. 10 years after that stagecoach ride into hell, Alara stood on the porch of the house she'd helped build, watching Rose teach the ranch hands' kids how to shoot. Her daughter was 12, tall and confident, and showed no signs of the fear that had dominated Alara's own childhood. Rowan came out, gray showing in his hair now, his face lined from years in the sun. "She's a good teacher." "She is. Better than I was at that age. That's because she grew up knowing she mattered, knowing she had choices." He put his arm around Alara's shoulders. "You gave her that, by refusing to accept what the world told you that you were." Alara leaned into him, watching their daughter laugh with the other children. "I gave her what someone should have given me, a chance to be more than what's expected." "And what did the world expect from you?" Alara thought back to that girl on the stagecoach, desperate and scared. Thought about Gideon's face when he'd called her property. Thought about all the people who'd assumed she'd break or quit or accept whatever scraps she was offered. "The world expected me to fail," she said, "to give up or die trying. Instead, I built something that'll outlast me. We built it." "We did." Rowan kissed her forehead. "Your mother would be proud." "I hope so." Alara watched the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in colors that still took her breath away after all these years. "I think she would be." Rose came running up the porch, dirt on her face and triumph in her eyes. "Mama, I hit the target 5 times in a row. Even Charlie couldn't do that, and he's been practicing longer." "That's because you're a natural," Alara said, pulling her daughter close despite her protests that she was too old for hugging. "Just like your father." "And smart like your mother," Rowan added. "Dangerous combination," Rose grinned, then ran back to her friends, already planning her next competition. Alara and Rowan stood together as darkness fell, watching their daughter play in the yard of the ranch they'd saved. Around them, the land stretched out vast and unforgiving and theirs. Not given, not inherited, but earned through blood and sweat and refusal to quit. "No regrets?" Rowan asked quietly. Alara thought about everything she'd survived to get here. The lies, the violence, the fear, the brutal work. Thought about the woman she'd had to become to survive, and the woman she'd chosen to be once she had the freedom to choose. "None," she said. "Not a single one." And it was true. The journey had been hell, but it had brought her here, to this porch, this man, this life she'd built with her own hands. She'd escaped the trap she'd been sold into and created something better. Not perfect, never perfect, but honest and hard-earned and completely hers. In the distance, coyotes called to each other in the gathering dark. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of sage and earth. Inside the house, the lamps were lit, casting warm light through the windows. Elora Whitfield Cade, no longer a desperate girl from Boston, but a woman who owned land and raised cattle and had proven that the harshest frontiers belonged to those bold enough to claim them, stood on her porch and watched the stars come out one by one. And for the first time in her life, she felt completely, unshakably free.